Have you ever been so convinced you have a winning idea that you bet everything on it? You can see the finish line, you can taste the victory, and you pour all your energy into building the perfect game-changing product you know the world needs. But what if you're wrong? Not about the core idea, but about the path you're taking to get there. In this episode of EduStory, we go inside a high-stakes hackathon with two aspiring founders, Leo and Sam. They have 48 hours to build an app that could change their lives. And they decide to go all in on a single jaw-dropping feature they call the magic. It's a feature they believe will make them winners. This is the story of the Lean launch. It's a story about ambition, caffeine-fueled coding, and a spectacular public failure that forces them to confront a hard truth. Sometimes, the smartest path to success isn't the most glamorous one. And sometimes, the best lessons are learned when everything falls apart. I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. The apartment smelled of stale coffee, anxiety, and the faint, sweet scent of solder from Sam's perpetually cluttered workbench. It was the smell of Friday night, the smell of two 20-somethings clinging to the bottom rung of the corporate ladder, dreaming of a different kind of air. Leo kicked the door shut, his arms laden with a greasy pizza box and a six-pack of craft beer, the weekend's lifeblood. "This is it, man," he said, his voice buzzing with an energy that seemed to physically vibrate the cramped living room. Innovate Hub Hackathon, 48 hours. Winner gets a seed round meeting with Velocity Ventures. Sam didn't look up from his laptop. His screen was a waterfall of green and white text on a black background, a language only he and the machine understood. "Leo, we have jobs, remember? The things that pay for this pizza. Mine involves a Q3 server migration that my boss, Brenda, talks about in her sleep." "Forget Brenda. Forget Q3, Leo said, sliding a slice of pepperoni onto a paper towel and pushing it next to Sam's keyboard. "This is our shot. I've had this idea, see? A real one this time." Sam sighed, the sound of a man who had heard this preamble before. Leo's ideas were like flash floods. They arrived with sudden, dramatic force and usually receded, leaving a muddy mess. There was the artisanal dog biscuit delivery service. Neither of them owned a dog. The subscription box for vintage concert t-shirts. It turns out they were expensive and hard to find. And the disastrous attempt at a social network for amateur astronomers, a surprisingly hostile and fragmented community. "Go on," Sam said, finally taking the pizza. "Okay. So picture this," Leo began, pacing the small patch of available floor space. "You want to work out. You open an app, but instead of just a list of exercises, it asks you, how are you feeling? How much time do you have? What equipment is available? Then, and this is the killer part, it generates a unique workout for you on the spot. But it gets better. As you do the workout, you give it feedback. This is too hard, or I can do more. And the app adapts in real time. It learns your body, your limits, your potential. It's not a static plan. It's a conversation. We'll call it Kinetic." Sam stopped chewing. He slowly swiveled his chair to face Leo. The code on his screen faded into the background. For the first time, an idea hadn't sounded like a get-rich-quick scheme. It sounded like an engineering problem, a difficult, fascinating one. "Real-time adaptation," Sam said, his mind already churning through logic loops and database queries. The processing load for a machine learning model to adjust on the fly based on user input, that's not trivial. That's actually interesting. It's more than interesting. It's revolutionary. Leo's eyes were wide. No more generic fitness plans, a personal trainer in your pocket, for everyone. "This is the one, Sam. I can feel it." And so, against the better judgment of his inner Brenda, Sam agreed. The Innovate Hub was a cavern of exposed brick, steel beams, and the nervous energy of 100 other dreamers. The air was thick with the clatter of keyboards and the low murmur of ambitious conversations. For 48 hours, Leo and Sam's world shrank to a single fold out table, two laptops, and a whiteboard that was rapidly covered in a spiderweb of wireframes, user flows, and database schemes. They fell into a natural rhythm. Leo, the visionary, was the architect of the experience. He sketched screens with the obsessive details of a Renaissance painter, agonizing over button placement, color palettes, and the exact wording of every prompt. He was the user's advocate, the one who fought for a seamless, intuitive journey. No, the I'm done button has to be green and satisfying, he'd argued. It's a reward. Sam, the pragmatist, was the builder. He was the one who had to turn Leo's beautiful sketches into functional reality. He wrestled with APIs, spun up a cloud database, and began constructing the core logic. He built the user authentication, the exercise library, the workout generator. It was solid, clean work. The app, in its basic form, was coming to life. By Saturday night, you could log in, tell it you had 30 minutes and a set of dumbbells, and it would spit out a sensible, challenging workout. "This is good," Sam said, stretching so far back in his chair that his spine cracked like a string of firecrackers. "It's stable. The core loop works." "It's not enough," Leo said, pointing a red marker at the whiteboard. He'd drawn a box in the corner and labeled it the magic. "We need the real-time adaptation. This is the hook. That's what gets us the meeting with velocity." "Leo, that's not a feature. That's a whole other project," Sam warned. "The AI model for that, it's a black box. I can plug in a pre-trained model, but to get it to adjust in real time based on live feedback, it's going to be buggy. It's a house of cards." "We have 24 hours, Leo countered, his voice low and intense. "We can sleep when we're funded." "Imagine, Sam, the demo. We show them the workout. Then we say, 'But watch this.' We tap a button that says, 'Too easy,' and the app instantly swaps in a harder exercise. That's the moment everyone's jaws hit the floor. That's the moment we win." Sam looked at the exhaustion etched on Leo's face, mirrored, he was sure, on his own. He knew it was a terrible idea. It was the engineering equivalent of trying to add a fifth story to a house before the foundation had fully set. But Leo's conviction was a gravitational force, and against all logic, Sam felt himself being pulled into its orbit. "Okay," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's build the magic." The next 24 hours were a blur of caffeine, frantic coding, and whispered arguments. Sam found a third-party machine learning library and managed to stitch it into their application. It was a messy, ugly piece of work, full of digital duct tape and hopeful prayers. They tested it a few times. The first time it crashed the app. The second time, it suggested doing 1,000 push-ups. The third time, it seemed to work, flawlessly swapping a standard squat for a weighted goblet squat. Good enough for the demo, Leo cleared, a triumphant, if slightly unhinged, gleam in his eye. They submitted their project with 3 minutes to spare. They hadn't slept in 2 days. They looked less like triumphant innovators and more like the haggard survivors of a shipwreck. The demo room was packed. The air was cool and controlled, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the hackathon floor. In the front row sat 3 judges, their faces impassive. One of them was Anya Sharma, a partner at Velocity Ventures, a woman whose quiet nods or slight frowns had launched and sunk 1,000 startups. Leo, running on pure adrenaline, took the stage. He was born for this. He painted a picture, told a story. He spoke of the millions of people who felt lost in their fitness journeys, intimidated by gyms and confused by generic plans. He introduced Kinetic not as an app, but as a partner, a guide, a revolution. The judges were leaning in. Even Anya Sharma had a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Now," Leo said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush, "I'd like to show you how it works." He mirrored his phone screen to the large display behind him. The Kinetic logo, a stylized K that Leo had designed, glowed beautifully. He logged in. The app responded instantly. He navigated to the workout creation screen. "Let's say I have 20 minutes and just my body weight," he said. The app processed for a moment and then displayed a clean, elegant list of exercises: push-ups, squats, planks, lunges. The room murmured in appreciation. It was slick. It was professional. But this is where the magic happens, Leo said, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel Sam's nervous energy from the side of the stage. This was the moment. Let's say the push-ups are too easy for me today. I'm feeling strong. I just tell Kinetic. He tapped on the push-up exercise. A small feedback menu appeared. He confidently tapped the too easy button. For a fraction of a second, the app seemed to hesitate. The loading spinner, a tiny version of their logo, appeared. It spun once, twice, then it froze. A collective intake of breath seemed to be sucked from the room. On the giant screen, the frozen spinner was a monument to their failure. Leo's confident smile faltered. He tapped the screen again. Nothing. He swiped. Nothing. The app was completely unresponsive. A horrible, stretched silence filled the room. Then the screen went black. The phone had crashed back to the home screen. Leo stood there, bathed in the stage lights, the ghost of his beautiful app, a dark rectangle on the screen behind him. He felt a hot wave of shame wash over him, so intense it was almost physical. Anya Sharma's voice cut through the silence, not unkindly, but with a surgeon's precision. So the real-time adaptation, is that still in development? The Q&A was a bloodbath. Leo and Sam stumbled through answers, their exhaustion and disappointment palpable. They tried to explain that the core app was stable, that the crash was from an experimental feature, but the damage was done. The first impression was of a product that didn't work. They were the guys whose app crashed. They didn't win. They didn't even place. They packed their laptops in silence, avoiding the sympathetic glances of the other teams, and trudged out into the cool night air. The apartment had never felt so small, so suffocating. The celebratory six-pack sat untouched on the counter. The pizza box was a greasy tombstone to their ambitions. "It's over," Leo said, slumping onto the couch. He stared at the ceiling, his face pale. "We failed. In front of everyone. In front of Anya Sharma. We're a joke." "The login worked," Sam said quietly, his back to Leo as he stared at his laptop. "What?" Leo asked, his voice thick with misery. "The login worked," Sam repeated, turning around. His face wasn't defeated, it was analytical. The user creation worked. The database connection was solid. The workout generator, the basic one, it worked perfectly. The UI was clean. 90% of what we built was good, solid code. "What's your point, Sam? The 90% doesn't matter when the 10% you bet everything on blows up in your face." "My point," Sam said, standing up and staring to Pace, reclaiming the space Leo had occupied 2 days earlier, "is that we didn't fail. Our ambition failed. Our ego failed. We tried to build the entire grand vision in a weekend. We tried to build the magic before we knew if anyone wanted the trick." He grabbed the whiteboard, which still held the ghosts of their frantic planning, and erased it with a furious energy. He drew a small, simple box in the center. "This," he said, tapping the box, "this is what works. A user can sign up, input time and equipment, and get one single, non-customizable workout plan. That's it. No AI, no real-time feedback, no magic." "You mean launch a failure?" Leo said, aghast. "Launch the dumb version of our app, the one with no killer feature. That's just admitting defeat." "No." Sam's voice was sharper now, filled with newfound clarity. "That's admitting we need to learn. Who cares about Anya Sharma right now? Who cares about Velocity Ventures? They're not our customers. Let's launch this." He tapped the simple box again. "Let's launch the absolute bare minimum, the simplest possible thing that delivers on the core promise. A good workout when you need one. We'll give it to 50 people, our friends, people from the gym, and we'll watch them. We'll talk to them. Do they even use it? What do they click on? What do they ask for? Maybe they don't care about real-time adaptation. Maybe they just want a better way to track their reps. Maybe the magic we thought was so important isn't the magic they want." Leo was silent, watching Sam. The engineer, the pragmatist, the one who was supposed to be the voice of caution, was now the one with the passionate, forward looking plan. It was a plan born not of hubris, but of humility. It wasn't about winning a competition. It was about building something real, something people would actually use. The grand vision of a standing ovation and a seven-figure seed round had evaporated in a humiliating public crash. But in its place, a new path was emerging. It was a slower, less glamorous path. It was a path of small steps, of listening instead of proclaiming, of learning instead of assuming. Leo looked at the simple box on the whiteboard. The minimum viable product, the MVP. It wasn't the revolutionary app he had dreamed of. It was a simple tool. It was a question, not an answer. He slowly stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He picked up a blue marker. Next to Sam's box, he drew an arrow and then another small box labeled Feedback Form. Then another arrow leading to a box labeled Version 1.1. Okay, Leo said, a flicker of the old energy returning to his eyes, but tempered now with something new. Something like wisdom. Let's not launch a product. Let's launch an experiment. Sam smiled, a genuine relived smile. He walked over to his laptop, deleted the entire folder containing the buggy, overambitious AI code, and opened the clean, stable core project. Let's get to work, he said. The air in the apartment began to change. The smell of stale coffee and anxiety started to fade, replaced by the quiet, hopeful scent of a new beginning. It wasn't the explosive launch they had planned, but it felt more real, more solid. It was the lean launch, and it was just the start. All right, my friends, so that was the story of the lean launch. Now, let's get to the lessons behind the lean launch. Leo and Sam's story isn't just about a weekend hackathon. It's a condensed, high-stakes drama that plays out in startups and corporate innovation departments every single day. It's the classic battle between a grand vision and on-the-ground reality. By breaking down their journey, we can extract some of the most powerful principles of modern business strategy, specifically those from the lean startup methodology. Let's unpack the key takeaways. Let's start with the core concept, the minimum viable product, or the MVP. This is the central lesson of the entire story. What Leo and Sam built for the demo was a prototype, not an MVP. It was a fragile, feature-heavy proof of concept designed to impress investors. The product they decided to launch at the end, however, was a true minimum viable product, MVP. So, what is an MVP? Eric Ries, who popularized the concept in his book The Lean Startup, defines an MVP as that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. Now let's break it down. Let's start with the minimum. What does that mean? Well, that means it has just enough features to be usable and solve a core problem for a specific group of users. In the story, this was stripping the app down to its most basic function, generating a single good workout. And next, let's talk about viable. It must actually work and provide real value. A buggy, crashing product isn't viable. The dumb version of Kinetic was viable. The magic version was not. And finally, of course, the product. It's something you can put in front of real users to get real feedback. So that is the minimum viable product, the MVP. Leo was seduced by his killer feature. He believed the real-time AI adaptation was the entire value of the app. The crash forced him to confront a critical question. What is the absolute core problem we are solving? The answer wasn't providing a real-time AI trainer. It was helping people get a good workout when they're unsure what to do. The MVP solves that core problem and nothing more. It's the antidote to the perfectionist trap that leads so many founders to build for months or years in secret only to launch something nobody wants. So that is the first important thing, actually the most important thing we can learn from the story, the core concept, the minimum viable product, the MVP. Now let's move on to talk about another point, the engine of progress, the build, measure, learn loop. The lean startup isn't just about building MVPs. It's about what you do with them. The goal is to get through the build, measure, learn feedback loop as quickly as possible. So let's start with build. Well, this is the process of turning an idea into a product, which is, as we talked before, the MVP. Then measure. This is where you put the product in front of users and measure their actual behavior. This isn't just asking, do you like it? It's collecting hard data. How many users signed up? How many created a workout? How many came back the next day? And learn. This is the most crucial step. You analyze the data from the measure phase to generate validated learning. This learning helps you make a critical decision. Do we persevere on our current path, or do we pivot and change some fundamental part of our strategy? Leo and Sam's initial plan was a linear build, launch, success fantasy. Their demo crash was an unscheduled, painful measure phase. The data was clear. The app, in its current form, was unstable. The learn moment happened in the apartment afterward. Sam realized they had tried to build and launch without a plan to measure or learn. Their new strategy, starting with a simple box on the whiteboard, is the perfect embodiment of this loop. Build the stripped-down app, measure, give it to 50 friends, and use the feedback form, as Leo astutely added, to collect qualitative and quantitative data, and learn. Analyze that feedback to decide what feature to build for version 1.1. Maybe users want to save their favorite workouts, not an AI coach. The loop allows them to let customers, not their own assumptions, pull the product forward. So that's our second point, the engine of progress, the build, measure, learn loop. Now let's move to the third point that I want to discuss based on the story. Let's talk about validated learning versus the visionary's trap. Now, every founder starts with a vision, a leap of faith. Leo's vision was a beautiful, intelligent fitness companion. The problem is, untested visions are just assumptions. The goal of a startup isn't to perfectly execute a pre-canned plan. It's to systematically turn assumptions into facts. So what is validated learning? It is the rigorous process of demonstrating empirically that you've discovered value truths about your business. It's the difference between saying, I think people will love this AI feature, and saying, we have data showing that 70% of our initial users are asking for a way to customize their workouts. The first is an assumption, the second is validated learning. And now let's see how that played in the story. Leo fell into the visionary's trap. He was so in love with his idea of the magic that he was willing to risk the entire enterprise on that single, unproven assumption. The crash was a brutal but necessary dose of reality. The new plan Sam proposed shifts their goal from proving Leo's vision is right to discovering what a valuable product looks like. By launching an experiment, they are actively seeking validated learning. They have replaced ego and assumption with humility and a scientific process. So, how do we apply these lessons? Now, you don't need to experience a public crash to benefit from these principles. Here's how you can apply them to your own ideas. First, isolate your leap of faith assumptions. Every business idea has two core assumptions: the value hypothesis, that what you're building will deliver value to customers, and the growth hypothesis, that you can find and grow a customer base. What are the biggest, riskiest assumptions in your idea? Write them down. For Kinetic, the assumption was users want and will pay for a real-time AI fitness coach. So that's the first thing. Isolate your leap of faith assumptions. Then, number two, define your MVP. What is the absolute smallest, simplest thing you can build to test your biggest assumption? It doesn't have to be code. An MVP could be a landing page explaining your service and collecting email signups, a concierge MVP. Or it could be a manual service where you do everything by hand to simulate what your app would do. Now, Leo and Sam could have offered to create daily workout plans via email for 10 friends to see if people even wanted custom plans. And a simple prototype with 1 or 2 core features, just like their final plan. And finally, get out of the building. Don't just build. Talk to potential users. Not your mom or your best friend, but real, impartial people who you think would be your customers. Don't ask, would you use this? Ask about their current problems and behaviors. A great resource for this is the book The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which teaches you how to ask questions that avoid simple compliments and get to the truth. And finally, my friends, If Leo and Sam's story resonated with you, here are the foundational resources to continue your learning journey. There's The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. This is the Bible of the movement. It lays out the entire philosophy of the MVP, the build, measure, learn loop, and validated learning in comprehensive detail. So if you want to learn more about this, by all means, read this book. And there's The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Black, the academic precursor to The Lean Startup. It's a denser read, but provides the customer development framework that is the foundation for much of this thinking. And of course, participate in a startup weekend or hackathon. There's no substitute for experience, of course. These events are real-life versions of the story. They force you to build, test, and pitch an idea under extreme pressure. It's the fastest way to learn these lessons in your bones. Ultimately, the Lean launch is a story about the triumph of humility over hubris. It's about understanding that the most successful products aren't born fully formed from a founder's genius. They are discovered through a relentless, iterative process of listening to users and learning from reality. And with that, we come to the end of our episode for today, our EduStory for today. I hope you're enjoying this new series that I've added. I started it last week, and this is the second episode from this series, Educational Stories, because I believe anything you want to learn, it's a lot easier when it is a story, and then you discuss the story. But anyway, if you like this story, if you want to have access to everything I create on English Plus Podcast and on other platforms as well, you can subscribe to English Plus Premium on Apple Podcasts or Patreon to get all of this content and much more. With that being said, thank you very much for listening. I'm Danny, and this is English Plus Podcast. And remember, never stop learning. I will see you next time.